Hi, everybody. Welcome to our monthly Care Coordinator Info Share session, and we're really glad that you're here. Of course, I have a few folks with me. I have my training team, Delight Mells and Cassandra Lynch, and we also have Anna Williams with our Living Well grant efforts. And I'm Kara Thrasher Livingston, and once again, thanks everybody. We have a decent-sized agenda to share with you here in just a second. We'll get it all situated for you. And in the meantime, everybody knows how to, share with us by text your questions and things like that. And we have a document here too to share about guidelines for CEH, and that is in our handout section. So there are all those things for you. As always with these info share sessions, one thing that we had to do was to give you your 1 hour CEH that is going to count for this session. We'll need to send you an email to send you that. We were having them set up to send a certificate to you, but it turned out that a lot of folks were not able to actually pick up the email, and some of us didn't get it, and some of us couldn't download the certificate. So just look for our email that will come after the session, and it'll say that this email is good for 1 hour CEH, and our certification team is aware of that too. And go ahead and fire away with your questions as we go along here. And I am showing my agenda, and we'll just go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody. Hope everybody's having a great week so far. So far, so good. Okay, and thanks for sending in your questions. So go ahead and go for it. So first up, we have our full lives CEH and renewal assignments. Our full lives formatting this year, the socio application or software, I should say, that was used was a little bit different. We, of course, went with our old wording of saying to fill out your evaluations and things like that, and that was how we could kind of take attendance, if you will, to the full lives. The application worked a little bit different this year. So, of course, we want you to fill out the surveys because that is a great help to Alaska Training Cooperative, and they need their surveys to be able to tell that the conference was quality for us. But it's not the only thing that you would have needed to do to let us know that you wanted CEH. And I think everybody who attended did send us an email. If you attended and you wish to receive 16 hours of CEH, just make sure that you email us and give us a quick note to say that that's what you want. So, of course, if you attended, you could earn 16 hours of CEH, and you could earn your renewal training. You would have to request an assignment for that, and we'll give you a fun assignment to complete. And Cassandra is taking care of everybody for those things. She's collecting your renewal assignments and issuing your certificate of completion for renewal training if you needed that for your full lives engagement. We got lots of great feedback about full lives this year. And thanks everybody for attending and being part of it. Cassandra, did you want to add to that?
I did. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
If you did not, if you wanted to do the assignment so that you could have a renewal certificate and you just didn't know what to do or say, or send me an email, because I know the last email we just talked about CEHs, because people got confused about the CEHs. But if you need the renewal assignment, please send me an email so I can send you the assignment if you haven't already. Many of you have, and you have it, and I've received it, so you don't have to do it again. But if you haven't and that is something you want, please send me an email saying you want to do the renewal assignment also. And I will send everything back in May 16th because it's due by May 15th. So you will not get your certificates until May 16th. So I do have it. I received it, and I thank you. And you can also, for the ones that need to do the recordings are ready.
That means you can go on to thank you, Cassandra, for taking care of everybody. You can go onto the Full Lives website and participate in the recordings now. So that's really good to know too. Okay, so it's a work in progress. There's a few folks coming in, chiming in here on our questions saying that they didn't receive the certificate yet. Please just give us a little bit more time to finish those. And they are a work in progress. We are aware of who attended and who requested and who did the assignment. So good job, everybody, on that. And okay, next agenda item is be careful about locking and protecting a PDF while signature gathering. So the PDF is proprietary software. I'm not sure that a lot of people use anything different than PDF for their signature pages, but what we are seeing is somehow after gathering a signature or signatures and we're submitting the PDF file to Senior Disability Services, and we're expecting another signature from staff at Senior and Disability Services to go on that, we're getting locked PDFs. So please make sure that you're not locking or protecting the PDF against further signatures when you send it in. Okay, so that will help us. I know some of us care coordinators have gotten some sent back saying, hey, I can't sign it. It's just a feature of the software, and it's sort of past what I could go in and teach to in specifics right now at the moment. But just make sure that you don't lock them against further signatures or protect them in other ways against further signatures when you send them in if you're expecting us to sign.
If there's any like entering a passcode to lock, that is going to prevent any additional changes to that PDF, which makes it hard for the reviewer to sign it. So it may not be you, care coordinator, it may be a provider, like another provider signing electronically, and they do that task of locking their signature. And how would I fix it? Google it. Dr. Google will tell you what to do to step that back and to fix it. So just YouTube it or Google it to figure out how that works, because it depends on the signature gathering techniques you're using. If you're using DocuSign or Adobe PDF or whatever, like we can't tell you which one you're doing or what's happening, but the end result is an additional back and forth where SDS is contacting you to approve your plan, but they can't unlock it. So yeah, that's where that's coming from.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. That's really, really helpful. And so I sort of skipped one, but I wanted to give it the last on the agenda thought process here. We are getting a lot of questions because it is time for folks to go ahead and think about travel and using waiver services while they're traveling. And I just wanted to have us sort of get on the same page about it and maybe get your thoughts. And if you have questions that are, specific to your particular situation, you could join us in our next office hours or just send us an email and we'll help look into that particular situation that you have. Okay. So guidelines to request, these are just guidelines. I can't list every single circumstance there is here, but in general, these are the concepts that we get questions about this time of year. Okay, guidelines for requesting services while a person is outside their community. So this is pertaining to absences that are at least 24 hours, but not longer than 30 days. And in general, outside the community means a person is going to go from where they live to a place that people usually don't make a commute to and come back in one day. Okay? And it doesn't include, flights and boat trips. I could get to Kenai by plane in 20 minutes, but it's still not a day trip. In other words, just because you can doesn't mean that people usually do, or that it should customarily be considered a day trip in most general examples. So day trips are, if I live in Anchorage and I go to Matsu, it's usually a day trip. If I live in Anchorage and I go to Seward, it's usually not a day trip. It could be done, of course, but it's usually not a day trip. or not considered a day trip. Again, this only pertains to when a person is out of their community for at least 24 hours. So if the person comes and goes to these places within 24 hours, then it doesn't even go through these filtrations. Okay, we're just trying to define it for you. And another few examples: if I live in Ninilchik and I go to Homer, it could be a day trip. If I live in Seward and go to Kenai, it's likely a day trip. Services during temporary absences are defined in our regulation. And the biggest, I'm not going to read it out to you because we're all familiar with it, but the biggest difference is that we have added employment services to this list. And so when you request services during a temporary absence, you can find the definitions in our old handbook, which is what this is directly from. A temporary absence could be due to medical necessity, an educational opportunity, a vacation, or another kind of absence that is necessary to prevent institutionalization. So it's kind of like a global thought process. The person must need the services while they're out of their community to maintain their current level of functioning and prevent placing the person at risk of institutionalization. And the provider, of course, must do the work and continue to oversee the provision of the services while the person is temporarily absent. You can receive services while you're absent from your home community for more than 24 hours, and if you are traveling within the United States or its territories, it's not available for travels outside of the United States. And so you use the policy that is available to you. We did put a link here. We can go through our document and look at our comments and then maybe look at the link. It is a good policy and still in effect. Basically, the care coordinator puts together a team and creates the plan. You would state your reason and rationale with supporting documentation for this proposed change of place for a service. Submit it no later than 30 days prior to travel in a support plan or in an amendment. And SDS may approve up to 30 days of this service after getting the request in this way. An extension past 30 days must be requested to SDS and needs to be approved. Okay.
Hey, Kara, can
Yeah.
you make the document a little bigger, the font size a little bigger for folks? They're making some requests in the chat. Sorry to interrupt. You can go down to the bottom right corner of the document. There's a little slider bar that next to 100%.
Yeah, I see that. It's covered
there you
with
go.
other things.
Oh, yeah. Totally know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay. Yeah. So I know it's general. Okay. So a 24-hour service, like a 24-hour out-of-home service, like Family Hub, Group Home, 24-hour daily respite, it's not possible to put together 24 hours of service while the person is absent from their home community because of the different regulations that are around daily respite, Group Home, Family Hub, and other combinations of services. If a person will be absent from Alaska for more than 30 days in a year, best thought is that they do need to consult with their DPA caseworker to notify of the absence. DPA maintains people's Medicaid, so they want to make sure that they remain eligible for Medicaid. And if somebody is absent from the state of Alaska for more than 30 days in a year, then DPA should be notified, and the DPA can determine how or if to keep their Medicaid active. Okay. And then so for waivers, here's some strategies to think about. We'll get to our questions in just a second. For waivers, we would want to use the travel memo, okay? Because of web posting delays, because we're having difficulties in getting updated documents posted to our website. So our travel memo doesn't have employment on it right now, okay? You can use that memo though. We'll take a look in just a second. For CFC, the worker would be performing CFC PCS. And so for CFC clients, there's a different form. Okay, it's called a PCS or CFC PCS travel request form. In some cases, you may need to submit both forms if the worker will provide any of the eligible services that can be reimbursed while outside of the home community and PCS. Okay, so sometimes a worker will go, maybe it's one worker and they'll be doing both. They'll change their hat, so to speak, during the time they're with the person. So you may need to submit both depending on if the person has a waiver and CFC or just a waiver. In general, the use of the service or combination of services should not exceed limits that are found as defined in the service itself or approved in the plan. They should not duplicate the same service that is given by other sources like a natural support, something like that. They should not be used outside of the weekly average depicted in the approved plan or amendment. So there were some questions about, what if it's not planned? What if it's like on a nice day, we want to do this, or if there's going to be nice weather during this period of time, we're going to do this. This is where you can actually put this in a support plan, and you can articulate in the support plan how the person will use this service outside of their home community and what the limitations are. And subject to approval and the explanation that you give, it's possible to have it in the plan and not have to make an amendment ahead, or you can just make the amendment. The service needs to fit its definition. For example, day habilitation is not recreation and leisure. It is learning skills in a community place. And this is not to say that a person can't learn skills during times that they're having fun. We need to know how it will happen in the plan and amendment and explain what the outcome is. Okay, so we wouldn't request day hab just to take a person out and have fun. We would request day hab to help the person work on their skills during that time, even if it is about discovering what gives you enjoyment or interacting socially during fun activities, that type of thing. It would have to be articulated in a more detailed way than just saying rec and leisure, because it's not issued for, or it's not approved for rec and leisure, solely recreation and leisure. Supported living is learning skills for independence in the home. So if we would request supported living, what skills are learned during the temporary absence, we would depict this in the plan or amendment. For people living in out-of-home residential, like family hab, group home, or even our residential supported living, consider what service you are requesting and how does that go together with the supports that are expected while they're outside of their home community. A person who has 24-hour supports in a group home, as I stated before, it isn't possible really to fit together 24 hours of Medicaid reimbursed service when out of the home or community. You may need to amend to add services available out of community and reduce their out-of-home residential for days that they're not in that home, like hourly respite and reduced group home days, or request supported living and reduced group home days. And it really depends on the person's particular situation. Okay, I'm not stating that this covers every single scenario. There's no way to cover every single scenario, but these are general guidelines and thought processes to go through when you're discussing using the services when outside the home community with your person. And so now I'm going to go with some questions, and I'll try to catch the ones that I didn't answer or our staff didn't answer. Thank you.
We flagged some at the top that I think are pretty good, like things to walk through because they're kind of scenario based. So I think people may need some help with the context of those.
Okay, I'm going to look for those. I'm looking through right now. Okay, so for hourly respite, while a person is on vacation and the unpaid caregiver is with them, would that now require an amendment to have that respite approved during travel? If it's going to be that the person is gone for over 24 hours and they're outside of their home community during that time, then yes, we're expecting another worker to come with them, to provide respite to their unpaid caregiver who is with them during that time. Then yes, an amendment, or you could put it into the plan. Okay, and that would be hourly respite for a person who is with their unpaid caregiver and the unpaid caregiver needs a break. So a respite worker comes along and provides that break over 24 hours and outside of their home community.
So to follow up on that, so that was one part of it. And then we have a whole bunch of comments. And then the follow up to that was, would you need to do an amendment if part of your support plan, your annual plan, includes that traveling respite?
No. If you have it in your plan where it says, hey, we go to this place and we're gone over 24 hours and there's a respite worker and the respite worker comes, we're going to be compliant with all the obligations of the agency to provide the respite. And if it, in short, it can be included in a plan rather than in an amendment. Okay, so either one. How's that?
And that's true of all travel. That's true of all travel. Like at the beginning of your year and you're planning team and you look ahead and we know we're going to go on a trip at some point, you could document it then at the beginning as part of that.
Sure. Couple other questions. Could I flesh out how and when it is allowable to leave the state for over 30 days? During the pandemic, people want to go somewhere for over 30 days. They don't want to risk their Medicaid. How can they do this? My best answer to this is they should talk to their DPA caseworker. So their basic obligation is that they're an Alaska resident, and there's all kinds of rules around, being an Alaska resident and times that are required to be in Alaska. And there's even rules about that for things like the permanent fund, right? So they should talk to their DPA caseworker about it, who could give them better specifics than myself. It's focused around an intent to return and then why they're gone, that type of thing. The caseworker can give the updated regs. What if it's an unplanned trip and there isn't time to get it submitted? Hang on. Finding it again. Unplanned trip. Okay. I just saw it.
I think it's the top flag.
Oh.
It might have jumped.
Okay. All right. And there isn't time to get it submitted 30 days prior. Then submit it within requirements like an amendment. My best answer. 30 days a year. I thought it was 30 days at a time, but they could take multiple trips. No, 30 days in a year. Other than that, I would say get with your DPA caseworker. Engaging in Medicaid with DPA has like a lot of obligations for reporting changes. And I cannot provide you with a list of all of what those are right now here today, but they include changes in income and changes in location and things like that. And this is one of the changes, would be absence from the state of Alaska. And it's not saying people can't go, it's just in order to engage in Alaska Medicaid, those are the rules. The DPA knows them, so that's why I say get with DPA. Okay.
So kind of circling back, I'm seeing like 3 different themes all related to exact dates. So if we have an annual plan, can we talk about kind of the difference between going like going to kind of within around your community versus and like not having exact dates in your plan versus needing those solid dates? Does that make sense, Kara? Because I'm seeing a lot of questions. Like if we're doing a date, if we're going to like, I live in Homer, but the Ninilchik State Fair or the Ninilchik Community Fair is happening, and so I'm traveling. Like I want to go to that. Would I need to do an amendment at the beginning of the year, or
No,
put it in
not
at the
unless
beginning
they're,
of the year?
if they're going to be gone over 24 hours, right? And
Okay.
it's outside of the home community, right? If a person lives in 2 places and they go to the Nilchik and they're doing something close there for a day, no, it's not over 24 hours. We don't want to get them for things that don't fit.
So
Okay.
if we don't know, if we have something that's like a little bit further than that, like I'm going to, I'm going to Anchorage to Denali or Anchorage to Fairbanks. And I know I'm going to do that at some point in the
Uh-huh.
next year, but I don't have
Okay.
a solid date. Do I
Put
need
it
to
in the
put in those
plan.
dates?
Put it in the plan and provide an estimate. Be as clear as you can about it. Provide an estimate, provide reasons why, provide what would trigger that trip, that type of thing. You can put it in the plan.
And then when you have a solid date and you have those dates, they change or it happens, then I would file an amendment to support it. And it's already approved. You're just ensuring that you're doing it. It's happening at
Uh-huh.
this time.
Yeah, of course. All right. Question says, why aren't Medicaid residency rules the same as general, like the PFD? That is up to our legislature. Medicaid is an entitlement that has to do with medical needs and financial eligibility. And I couldn't even start to say why, other than states have rules around Medicaid and we have to implement Medicaid the way we say we will to CMS, and CMS approves it. So, if you have comments about that, you could share them with legislators. I would probably take a look at it to make sure that it's, I don't have the research behind me to be able to identify the similarities and differences between them right now today. Let's see here. The person has respite on their annual plan to relieve the unpaid caregiver, and the recipient and their family, including the PCA and a different person who is the unpaid, all go on vacation. Is an amendment still needed? If they're out of their home community for over 24 hours and the rest that will be provided in a place that's out of their home community, then yes. If the vacation was not known about at the time of the plan, make an amendment in that situation. I do get a lot of questions about amendments, and I have been giving, sort of recommendations to make an amendment, even though it doesn't literally fit the requirements. My rationale for those things for an amendment, my rationale for those things is in order to provide the story of continuity of care, you're sometimes in a gray area, it's better to just go ahead and make that amendment. Okay. A home that is a group home and a day hab provider, can they do group home when when they go camping with the person and can't build group home? Can they build day hab during times like camping in the summer? They can. They're not going to build a group home because that's not camping, right? They can build day hab, but you need to submit a document like a plan or an amendment if it's out of their home and community for over 24 hours, and you get the approval back to do day hab. And it still can't supersede the hours or the limits that are defined in that regulation about day hab. If the service is provided within the state and the goals are still applicable in the visited community, then why do we have to be so invasive in the consumer's life? Um, I think I get it. I get the question. It's more so about safeguards and oversight to make sure that services are provided according to the person's needs and goals and wishes, not so much about, you know, trying to be invasive in the person's life. There's a lot of rules around implementation of Medicaid.
Especially about community in the communities that you're receiving services in. That's a
Uh-huh.
part of that as well, as
Why
far
have
as the
I?
CMS bubble goes.
Uh-huh. Okay, so there's a question about reviewers asking me to rescind amendments that follow this criteria. I cannot answer that. I would have to know specific, Harmony ID numbers and circumstances for that. I really can only give general information in the meeting. If you want specific clarification around specific cases, you'll need to connect with us so we can help or be more specific. Okay,
With
I've had one
with
denied.
HIPAA.
Go ahead.
With
Right.
HIPAA. Remember HIPAA.
Exactly. Exactly. I've had one denied when it said they would be going camping but didn't have specific dates. Dates weren't provided due to them wanting to go when weather was permitting. However, denied because we weren't specific. In that case, it's hard for me to tell exactly that that was the one and only thing. And I'm not saying that that's not true, what you wrote at all. Again, it's a specific case, and that your statement of having one denied, you know, your best bet is to be as specific as you can. Can you estimate days of day hab in the summer in the plan? You can provide the expected utilization of summer day hab if it's different than the rest of the year day hab. This is true now and has always been true. CARA expects to receive, to use X number of days of day hab during the school year and more of day hab in the summer. However, the entire annual amount doesn't exceed the regulatory requirements for limit and definition of the service. If someone has group home and is leaving on vacation for a week with natural supports, is an amendment needed? It's a best practice to turn one in. You can put that on an amendment. You can put that on a plan. The big reason for that really would be so that we, meaning not SDS literally, but there shouldn't be any billing for group home while the person is not in the home. So it's also possible to, I'm giving you general answers. It's possible to request less than 365 days of group home too, if a person knows that they're going to be going with family here and there, or to provide an estimate like that. Can we do a mixture of supported living day hab and hourly respite for out-of-state trips to replace group home? You could request that. You'd have to tell how the hourly respite is replacing an unpaid caregiver. There has to be an unpaid caregiver. It has to be a reasonable amount of each. You have to show what the purpose of each of the services is. I wouldn't say the best approach is to, do like, hey, let's try to, you know, total up X number. Let's just divide 24 hours by 3, that type of thing. I would focus on the purpose of the service and their reasoning for that, and then ask for that amount of service while they're, doing an out of state trip. Okay. We do get a lot of questions about this. That's why we specifically say that the 24-hour service it's just not something that we should have in our head to try to mix the services together and go at it in amounts rather than what's good for the person and what fits for the person. Okay. As an example, if someone has upcoming medical care where you know they'll be out of the community, but you don't have specific dates, if you put it in the plan with a breakdown of how the services will be used, you do or do not need to do an amendment once you know the specific dates. Delight, what was your best answer to that? Do they
I'd
have
say
to
you
do an
need to
amendment
do
as well?
you'd have to do the amendment for the dates. They, it's important for all parties to understand, because this isn't just for the services that are, for the services that are being delivered in travel. All other additional supportive services need to be aware that the client isn't there, that they're traveling. So
Right.
it's part of the effort of including an entire planning party team in understanding that these are the timeframes that services are being delivered in a out of routine context. We're traveling, we're not in our community. So that impacts all additional services that would not be issued or delivered while the person is traveling. So there's the services that are being delivered, and then there are services that are going to pick up back once you come back. Now, not all clients have those, but that's part of the rationale for that. You have to make sure everybody's aware so that we're not, sending DSPs to show up at people's houses when they're not there, or having meals delivered when someone isn't there. That's part of the purpose of ensuring the amendment is circulated so that everybody knows when somebody is traveling, and that we can ensure that services are being that they have a solid date of when they resume as well, because that's another big piece. We know when they left, but then the resume is a big thing too. So that's part of the rationale of why you would need to amend once you have fixed dates.
And then somebody said with group home, when you don't have respite in the plan, obviously a travel amendment would not be approved. So, I mean, if someone is going to leave the group home, that's why I said you can reduce services. In an amendment, you could reduce the days of group home and add the respite with the story of, why respite is needed during these days, and that group home is not, we're reducing the service of group home by these days that the person is out of the community with their natural support. Okay. All right. So good discussion, everybody. I really appreciate your engagement with this. And, please feel free to email sdstraining@alaska.gov with your questions. And please join us in office hours if you're faced certain scenarios regarding the use of services while one is out of one's community. And so, Delight, I'm going to throw it to you, if that's okay.
Yeah, let me grab my summary of guide changes, and I can share. Can you see my email here that you were all issued? Maybe Kara, can you let me know if you see it?
I can see it.
Oh,
I can see it.
if it'll
The new
come back.
T24, right?
Yes. For
That's
those of you that don't know, that it gets a little wild with all of our webinar content. We have all these different windows open. So you got a new guide this morning, and it's a little bit earlier than what we anticipated. We had expected to release this guide in May, but there were some changes that occurred that meant that we needed to inform you as soon as possible. So I'll identify that one for you right away. But what changed? We did make a change to Chapter 3, so I'm just going to make this bigger. And it's really specific to NFLOC interim reviews. When they're reviewing a complete application they're going to be so you have a renewing level of care, and the NFLOC team is doing a interim file review. If there is a delay in either the submission of the application or in processing, they may end up making the new level of care start date the date of the complete application if there's been some sort of delay in the processing. Otherwise, the level of care is going to be the day following the end of the level of care. So this is a really small bullet point that's included in the application section in Chapter 3. So it's really informing you of when the level of care date is going to be different than usual, and it's if there's a delay in the submission of the application or in the processing of the file review. All right. So that takes us to the changes to Chapter 8 or other plan actions. And we have two sections here that were significantly updated. One of them is incomplete notices. We're actually going to go into Harmony and we'll look at the incomplete notice process for a support plan. So you turned in your support plan, you submitted it, and you submitted your note. Both were submitted, and then you get a notice back that it's incomplete. Your response to that incomplete is going to be its own new note type, an incomplete response. So we're going to go look at that. We'll circle back to that concept in Harmony, but let's move to this final piece here, talking about late support plan submission form. So these instructions have changed. We gave you guidance at the beginning of February telling you that it was only going to be needed for initials and renewals. However, as with any launch of a document gathering or a data gathering process, it really became apparent that we needed to also require this for amendments. All right. So the late plan submission form is also now required for amendments. So the instructions have been adjusted to reflect that, okay? So if you're late, you need to file in the plan forms area a late plan submission form. And it's a pretty basic form. We've walked through it before. But we've been looking at the data from this stuff coming in, and a couple of things that we want to emphasize to you when you submit your late plan form is for you to be brief, just be concise in the reasons for why it was late. And if you're reporting about your own personal health because something happened to you why it was late, please avoid putting in your HIPAA information regarding that late submission. These submissions, if you transfer this case, another care coordinator could go back into that and see that information. And we're also pulling this data and we're making reports on it. We're obviously keeping it HIPAA compliant, but for us to also ensure that your HIPAA information is being filtered out is like an additional step that that's a little bit more data tracking than we want. So we want to emphasize to you that it's okay for you to select, care coordinator illness as a general, and then you can give, a very basic, I was unable to respond because I was ill for this amount of time. We don't want you to get too much more detail than that. The last things I want to kind of emphasize before we go into Harmony and look at how to do an incomplete response is just some reminders about the implementation of the forms that have been released in the past couple of months. So remember, we have the new forms for NFLOC 04 and we have the new CFC 06. So those are active, but they're not required until 8/31. I do suggest that you use them, get comfortable with them, especially the CFC 06. There's been a change with how we process those now, or a change in procedure. When we turn in a CFC application for an IDD client that has level of care, you only need to do the CFC 06, so you do not need to do the NFLOC application if you have an IDD client. And all CFC 06 applications need to be filed as a separate application note in harmony with the CFC program selected. So if you have an ALI client that is renewing their services, right, where we're filing our renewal application, and you're also filing for CFC, you're going to file 2 separate application notes in harmony. So I'm going to go back a little bit before we go farther to look at your questions. Unless if any of you saw any burning ones that you thought needed to be addressed as they came in. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of questions about level of care gaps. Okay. So if there's a level of care gap because of SDS processing, they're going to do extensions and they're going to do whatever it takes to fix it. That's part of why we have decided to do a procedural change of changing the level of care for INFLOC and interim reviews. They're trying to figure out ways to fix that when it's with processing. Okay, so that's one of them, because we don't want these gaps. We're seeing that the gaps have been occurring, and so we're coming up with other methods for trying to avoid those. Let's see. Some good questions. Okay, so what should I do if I didn't file a plan late? Like it was transferred to me and it's late because I got it late. It's not really my fault, but it came in, like whatever I'm submitting is going to be late, or I'm responding, like, you know, SDS says, hey, this plan is late, so turn in the form, but you didn't turn in the form, or you didn't turn in the plan. Go ahead and submit the late plan form anyways. And you can put in the comments that you were not the care coordinator at the time of submission. That would be okay. It's good in the sense that you're documenting that it wasn't you. And more than anything, you know, being concise in these areas, but provide enough detail to give some scope to the context. There's a lot of options for choosing on why you were late. There's a whole slew of them. And you can pick the one that applies and then just give additional context for documentation purposes for you to be able to, because who knows when this is going to be pulled up, you know, a couple of years from now, I don't know, but it's going to be hard for you to remember why something was late. So use it to your advantage. You don't have to write a novel, but write enough so that you can remind yourself of what happened in those specific contexts. Okay. Is there a paperwork difference for an interim file review versus a full review for NFLOC? Is it similar to IDD, or is it up to the reviewer? So typically when they're doing the reviews, they're going through and they're looking at all the medical documentation that was submitted on the application. And then they're also cross-referencing it with what was previously filed the past year. Looking at those 2 years of medical histories helps the assessor determine if they need to go back and do a in-person or a tele-assessment. So that's really what they're looking at. There's really isn't a change in the application documents that you're submitting. They're the same as you would for any other. They're not being fine-tuned like IDD at this time. It's just put in the same documentation on the NFLOC side for your application as you would normally, and then when they do the interim review, they may request additional information when they're doing their look back. Okay, so these are great questions. I really appreciate all of them. We have about 9 minutes left, and with that time, I want to take you through the steps for an incomplete response. I'm going to go through it fairly quickly, but enough to give you exposure so that when you go through and read the instructions, they make sense, okay? So step 1, we're in harmony. And we're going to realize that we have an incomplete notice by checking your notes, right? And I got a lot of notes in here. I do. And they're not all very current, as you can see. So I do have my incomplete notice down here at the bottom. And I really need to make sure that I track, who's it for. It's for this specific client. And then I can clear this note from my list by checking this box in the far right corner, going up to tools and marking it as read. Okay, and it says you successfully marked it as read. It didn't delete the incomplete. It didn't do it. Really, all it did was it removed it as one of my notes from my dashboard. So when I look at my dashboard, I have one last note. So when I get another one, I kind of know, oh, I have 15 again, and I need to go and look and see what happened there. From here, I'm going to go to my active consumers and go to my client that I was looking at where this was happening under. Find my client. And I'm actually going to go to my plans because it was for a plan. And I'm going to move to select the plan that's in an incomplete status. Okay, so we go to our plan with an incomplete status. And we'll move to our plan notes. So typically, we'd also have my original submission submitting my notes. But when you look at your incomplete notice, I just want to give you a little look at some things some tips about when you get one of these. They have boilerplate language. There's a lot of boilerplate language in these every single time. What's really important for you to key into is that they'll have a list of things you need to do. That's your ticket for being done with the incomplete. Find the list of what they need. And then the next step is making sure you're tracking who sent you this incomplete notice. Who sent it to you? Because when you respond, you're going to need to make sure you adhere to whatever they tell you, and then you send the note with that person as a note recipient. So let's say that I was late, but I didn't include the late plan submission form, right? And so they say, oh, this was late. We're putting this in an courtesy incomplete notice until you submit it. Well, I wouldn't have an attachment to send back to them because I'm filing that that late plan form in the form. But I still need to tell them I did it. So I'm going to add a note. I'm going to go to the note type, plan note. That's a big one. We want to make sure that we're filing our incomplete response in the same plan that was put into an incomplete status. In here, we would say, and then if you had a lot of bullet points and they wanted you to get a care calendar, or they needed to get some signatures or whatever, you would add those attachments. And then you're going to make sure that you include your note recipient at the bottom. So down here, we choose our note recipient. We select that person. See, they're down there at the bottom. They're there. Okay. We're going to change the note status into submitted. And we'll file, save, and close the note. That's it. That's all we need to do here. The plan informations tab is going to, the plan status is going to stay in incomplete. And from there, the reviewer is going to move it. Hopefully you get everything right. You know, it's one and done. They'll move it into approved pending SA. And then from there, SA works on it. And then it goes to approved pending DPA. That's what this plan status does. You don't need to change it. Don't change it if it's incomplete. Leave it alone. But you do need to make sure that you put in a plan note, incomplete response, and it's in a submitted status. So, clear as mud? Don't worry, it's just exposure. It's like, hopefully when it's time for you to do your response, you can just flip to the guide and walk through the steps, and it'll seem a little bit more familiar to you. Any other questions that you saw coming in, Kara, as we were going?
There's a couple comments about Harmony. Just to clarify, the late plan form is also put in a submitted status.
Yeah,
I received it. Okay.
It's not a deal breaker if you don't. I mean, if you forget to put it in, because we need you to keep your plan details form that has all of your plan content in it. That needs to stay in draft always, because you need to be able to work on that in the future. So if at different points in time you kind of botch it and don't put the other forms and submitted, it's not a deal breaker. What's really important is to manage your statuses of your notes and your plan. The only time you need to move your plan from draft to submitted is when you're ready to turn it in, and it's a one-time thing. Once it's in, and they'll process it from there. You may have to submit notes many times in the course of turning different items in. Looking back, see other stuff coming in.
Yeah, it says, after this meeting, can someone help me access Harmony? We are not available to provide office hours today, unfortunately. Initial support plan start date. Someone said it can't start until the support plan is signed, not level of care date. Has there been a change?
So I don't think that there's been a change, but we have to always consider that, like, the context of differences between dates and signatures. Reviewers may have questions if it's all really, like, if the plan is really late. If it's really late and they don't have enough context to understand why services go all the way back to level of care, they'll need to have more information. So if we have something going on where signatures are delayed for whatever reason, and services were delivered before signatures were signed, you got to spin the story, because we can't authorize services until there's been a approved plan. Okay.
All right, and then a question about, will training be backing up care coordinators when reviewers are stating things that are required that are not in the guidebook? Okay, so we learn from those things a lot, and it's a conversation ongoing. Of course we'll ask, but we have to work as a team and try to change our training documents and try to work with our teams and just make sure we give you the best info we can. A lot of these are situational. It's not possible to answer every question like that right now today. Anything else to add, Delate?
Yeah, I would just say that, the guidebook is only as current as it is, like, today, literally, like, it's current today. And every time we issue this guidebook, I start getting notices within the hour of people being like, hey, so this actually needs to change. This isn't accurate anymore. And so we have to prepare that for the next guide. What is concerning for us is when we don't have time, our team hasn't had time to notify you, because we do know that you're relying on the guidebook as the steps for submission. And so if those submission steps change, we let you know as soon as possible. Know that the Harmony guidebook is a technical manual for submissions. It's not the same as review criteria. That those are the review criteria for looking at the plans and requesting information is all regulations. Okay, so that's where that's housed in. So everything's pretty situational when it comes to looking at regulations, like what's the situation, what are the services. But when it comes to the submission process within Harmony, we do back you on a lot of it because we know what we messaged. So we know what we told you. And so we do inform staff that when there's been a change, we have to, we do a lot of working together to collaborate and figure out where we need to tune up the communication. Right, Kara?
Right.
Well, I think we're at time. We're at 3:02. Are there other questions coming in that we can answer off the cuff?
Okay. If a person has IDD and CFC or ISW and CFC, do they have to turn in a VOD and medical records?
No.
So no, they don't.
I have a few drafts that I need to be deleted. How can I request those? Come to office hours and we'll delete them for you together. One of the big concerns, we don't ever want to delete anything that you need. So it really helps for us to screen share or talk it through and confirm what needs to be deleted. Come to office hours and we can help you out.
Will there be future updates of a care coordinator manual that covers info outside of the Harmony guide? Yes, we still have our document that we've shared, a training document for care coordinators. That's everything outside of Harmony. And so we're trying to clean up the CFC part. We're working with internal processes so that we can make sure that they match what we ask care coordinators to do. And then when we do that, we'll issue another care coordinator manual that's not Harmony stuff. Okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to, I think I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen because I'm going to be pulling up email contacts for some of your questions. We can grab some of that you have coming in here. So if you're ready, we're just kind of doing some question answer. You don't have to stay any longer if you want, or you can hang out for a few minutes. And we're just responding back to some of these in chat.
Okay.
But Kara is going to be rolling out. And so if you want, Kara, you can move me to presenter and I can answer a couple more. But other than that, we're good to go. All right. So just checking a few more if I can find in here. It looks like we have almost everyone.
I think I missed one. Okay.
So the T24 says to leave the late plan form in draft. Is that correct? Yes. All right. Let's see. Oh, okay. Robert, I see your question about medications. We're having a meeting about that tomorrow. Don't worry, we're trying to figure that out.
Delight, I just asked him to email it to us so that we can have it in writing when we have the meeting.
Yeah, that would be great. Okay, questions about flexibilities versus permanencies, 2 visits annually, etc. I have as much news as you do from the last session. That's where we're at. Unsure if there's been any advancements. Typically, and it's a big deal because right now they're still pushing it through their application packets. Let's see. Mary, this is a good one. So are we filing both CFC and NFLOC forms at renewal? Yes. If you're trying to realign your level of care dates for CFC and NFLOC, or for any of them, if your CFC level of care dates are currently off because they decided to do CFC after your plan level of care, on renewal, file them both at the same time so that they get realigned. Okay? File both your waiver and your CFC application at the same time so your level of care get reset. Okay, looking at some of these others. Oh. So sometimes we have notifications get issued by ticklers versus notes because they are actions outside of SDS. So I have someone saying, I had a tickler that informed me that my waiver client was denied by DPA and the POA needed to call them. I missed looking at this by 4 days. Should it have been in the note section? No, because SDS doesn't create the note. You know, a human makes a note. When we make these notes, they're made by people. Ticklers are fired when something happens that's automated. So like it could be that somebody flipped a switch and then somewhere along the line a tickler is sent. When we have a denial by DPA, it's not always something that SDS is aware of until it hits, and we're informed just like you are. It's kind of like a flip gets switched and we get a tickler. So that is one of them where it's why it's important to track your ticklers, especially for closures and for denials. All right, so some like folks saying ditto about level of cares on CFC APDD. Is there any further clarification regarding respite falling into the CFC program? It hasn't happened yet. Honestly, I think that our division has a lot. It hasn't been forgotten, but we're managing a lot right now with everything that's been happening with the pandemic. But it is on their trajectory. Good question. All right, so I think I caught everyone. I might have missed one or two. If I missed you, I'm sorry. I really am. What ends up happening is anytime somebody submits a question, it causes them to bounce. If you didn't get your question answered, stop into office hours on Thursday or email us and we're happy to work with you on trying to sort it out. But with that said, keep your eyes peeled for your CEH for this session. We'll be emailing it out and we'll be posting this session live on YouTube. So if you missed part of it or if you need to forward it to your teammates that couldn't come, or if you just want to review a section of it, please feel free to check it out. It'll be on our training YouTube channel. So with that being said, I just want to thank you all for all that you do and know that we really appreciate you and all your efforts to make Alaska more inclusive and support Alaskans to be independent. So I hope you have a great day and we'll keep in touch. All right. Bye.